Hello and very warm welcome at Amish Cycle 5858. I am Amish Cycle. Foreign news have been reported by American, European, Asian, African, Australian news channels and the news agencies. So please, let's go to the headlines.
Good evening. I'm Savannah Sellers in for Jose. We begin tonight with the community in mourning after gunfight erupted following a high school homecoming football game in Mississippi. This was the scene in downtown Leland overnight. At least 6 people were killed with many more hurt. Daylight revealing bullet holes like this in cars and buildings. And this was just one of 3 shootings near schools in that state last night. Our Jay Gray has more.
Chaos as deadly violence unfolded in tiny Leland, Mississippi. Authorities say 6 were killed after a shooting on Main Street following the town's homecoming football game Friday night.
People who were enjoying themselves last night found themselves faced with violence that no community should be faced with.
The victims ranging in age from 18 to 41. Across the state, another deadly shooting.
We have a medical call at Hometown High School. It's going to be multiple people shot.
This one at a high school football game in the small town of Heidelberg, where officials say 2 people died. Mississippi's governor says one of the victims was pregnant. Police today arresting an 18-year-old suspect. And in Rolling Fork, Mississippi, a 3rd shooting outside of the local football game there last night. Authorities there arresting 2 individuals. While back in Leland, the search for the gunman continues. City leaders asking for help.
This is not a time to keep your mouth closed. It's a time you open your mouth. You can save a lot of lives if you open your mouth and tell us what you have seen.
The mayor working to heal a community in pain and on edge.
Please pray for Leland, Mississippi. Pray for your city, and let's pray for this country.
Jay Gray joins me now from Leland. And Jay, what do we know about the investigation tonight and the other victims there?
Yeah, and Savannah, let's start with that investigation. Within the last hour, we've seen crews up and inspecting what is the town's only surveillance scene to area hospitals.
Jay Gray in Leland, Mississippi, thank you. Also tonight, the East Coast is bracing for impact as a massive nor'easter is expected to make its way north, bringing heavy rains and winds and potentially dangerous flooding. Jesse Kirsch reports from the storm zone.
In Charleston, South Carolina, today some streets briefly turned to streams. Similar scenes playing out as far south as Florida since Friday when we saw this. Here in Isle of Palm, South Carolina, waves have been
As the hostage families await an update on the return of their loved ones, Hamas police are back on the streets of Gaza. The terror group said yesterday it would redeploy security forces and reassert its authority along the Gaza Strip. President Trump yesterday warned the terror group to uphold the ceasefire.
They knew the retribution would be tremendous, unsustainable. It would have been unsustainable. It would have been complete obliteration, and they don't want that. And nobody wants it at this point. They want to get on with rebuilding the entire Middle East. It's not only Gaza; it's going to be the entire Middle East.
Let's bring in John Hanna, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. So, what do you think the chances are, John, that Hamas upholds this agreement?
Well, the signs aren't good, John. As soon as the Israelis began to pull back from that line of control, these guys came out of their tunnels to reassert their control over the population in Gaza, to settle scores with anybody that they thought had tried to cross their authority. And I think they're making a statement that they're the ones who are not going anywhere. They're going to stay in control. They're going to stay the leading edge of Palestinian politics. They're already crafting a narrative that this was something of a victory for them. The Iranians couldn't stand up to the IDF. Hezbollah couldn't. Hamas came out and is still standing.
Well, they're still standing, but I want to put up on the screen a list of the Hamas leaders who have been whacked in the days since the October 7th attacks, going back to July 2024. Hamas and Hezbollah leaders have been killed, captured, or overthrown, as the graphic says. How can they call this a victory when so much of their leadership has been decimated?
Yeah, I mean, martyrdom is the thing with Islamic fundamentalists, right? You're sent straight to heaven for their great feats against the Israeli occupiers. Listen, what Hamas will say is we were sitting with the United States, with Israel, with all the Arab states in those negotiations. We are the address for negotiating the future of the Palestinian national movement. The Palestinian Authority in the West Bank, illegitimate, corrupt, nowhere to be found. We are the ones putting the Palestinian issue back on the international agenda. It's wicked. It makes no sense to any kind of Western mind when you look at that devastation in Gaza. My guess is it doesn't make sense to the people of Gaza who are returning to their homes that have been left in rubble. But this is the narrative they're crafting, and it speaks to the challenge that the disarmament of Hamas.
On this Saturday night, a tense calm holds in the Gaza Strip. The devastating return for thousands of Palestinians as Israeli families prepare to welcome loved ones home. Jeff Semple is in Tel Aviv and speaks to Canadians on the ground. Escalating standoff as the U.S. threatens China with sweeping new tariffs. Ottawa is caught in the middle, facing sanctions from both sides. Tragedy in Tennessee, why officials say a deadly explosives factory blast could have been foul play. Plus, demolition and reflection.
I was 6. I remember my first day here.
Residential school survivors gather as the last structures are torn down.
Global National reporting tonight.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The Gaza ceasefire is holding for a second day as Palestinians return to devastated neighborhoods and Israel prepares for the possible release of hostages within days. Tens of thousands walked through the beleaguered Gaza Strip today, coming back to what's left of their homes and sifting through the rubble after 2 years of bombardment. Israel has pulled back troops while aid is set to roll in, but big questions remain around disarmament, governance, and rebuilding. For now, the truce holds, but hope and anxiety are running high. Our Jeff Semple is in Tel Aviv tonight, where the countdown is on for the next critical steps in this fragile peace process. Jeff?
Well, you do every Saturday for the past 2 years. Thousands have gathered here at what's become known as Hostage Square. We're used to seeing scenes here of people overcome grief and anger. Tonight, that is replaced with a celebratory atmosphere, a sense of joy, of anxious anticipation and hope that this nightmare might soon be over. The largest rally to date, more than 500,000 gathered, including this Canadian mother and daughter who traveled here from Montreal to bear witness.
It's a historic moment, and there's nowhere else I want to be.
On October 7th, Hamas captured 251 hostages. Their images are plastered across the country. 48 hostages remain in Gaza, 20 of whom are believed to still be alive, including Hagar.
Very good morning to you. It's 6 o'clock on today's show. Crowds gather in Tel Aviv ahead of the expected release of the remaining Israeli hostages tomorrow.
And in sports, Stephen Gerrard has withdrawn from the process to become the next Rangers manager.
So he has on Sunday, the 12th of October. Chants of thanks to President Trump as hostage families gather ahead of tomorrow's deadline to bring their loved ones home.
Here we stand, living proof that when courage meets conviction, miracles can happen.
So Keir Starmer will join the US President and other world leaders at a peace summit in Egypt tomorrow, also to come.
And you know something else? You're so egocentric that if I miss my therapy, you can only think of it in terms of how it affects you.
Hollywood icon Diane Keaton, famous for her roles in Annie Hall and The Godfather, dies at the age of 79. New EU travel rules come into force, with British passengers told to expect queues at some European airports.
And the top 2 players in the world of darts will go head-to-head again in the final of the World Grand Prix as Luke Littler prepares to face Luke Humphries.
Very good morning to you, Gareth Barlow with you on a Sunday morning. Hundreds of thousands of people, including the families of Israeli hostages, have gathered at a huge rally in Tel Aviv. There were chants of praise for President Trump as the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff addressed crowds ahead of the expected release of the remaining Israeli hostages. The US President's due to visit Israel tomorrow before heading to Egypt for a summit to finalise the peace agreement and end 2 years of war in Gaza. There, he'll be joined by other world leaders, including Sakir Sam. We'll have more on that with Amanda in a moment. First, though, to the scenes last night in hostage swap. Well, they were some of the shouts of thanks from hostage families as once again they gathered in Tel Aviv, but this time with a sense of hope. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who arrived in Israel yesterday, told crowds that miracles can happen as he spoke alongside President Trump's daughter Ivanka and son-in-law Jared Kushner, who both worked on the ceasefire plan.
All of our hearts beating as one, gathered here in Tel Aviv for peace, for unity, and for hope in this sacred place we call Hostage Square.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. Huge crowds have gathered in Tel Aviv, Israel, for what they hope will be their last hostage release rally. Donald Trump's Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, was among those to address the crowd. Trump's name was greeted by cheers, but there were boos when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was mentioned. Many Israelis blame Netanyahu for failing to agree a hostage release deal sooner. Hamas is expected to release the remaining hostages on Monday. Palestinians returning to their homes in Gaza face widespread destruction as the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas holds. Donald Trump is due to chair a Gaza peace summit alongside his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah al-Sisi on Monday in Sharm el-Sheikh, with world leaders flying in for that meeting. A group of soldiers has joined anti-government protests in Madagascar for the first time and called on other troops to follow them. The demonstrations began in September over shortages of electricity and water and have grown into a challenge against the country's president, Andry Rajoelina. This is DW News from Berlin. You'll find more on our website, dw.com.
Europe Rendezvous, presented by Armin Georgian on France 24. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. You're watching Daybreak on France 24. Our headlines this hour. Donald Trump's daughter and son-in-law join crowds in Tel Aviv as they celebrate the imminent release of the remaining Israeli hostages. Hamas officials have said it will take place Monday morning before Trump and other world leaders gather for a summit in Egypt. We'll get the latest from Jerusalem with our correspondent Nova Tarnopoulos. A group of soldiers joined youth protesters in Madagascar, urging fellow troops to disobey orders and support the movement. Protesters are calling for Madagascar's president to step down, and there are conflicting reports about his current whereabouts. We'll get the latest from our correspondent Gael Borja. And American actress Diane Keaton has died at the age of 79. Beloved for both her quirkiness and her depth, she was best known for comedies like The First Wives Club and Annie Hall, which won her an Oscar. Hundreds of thousands of people called for the release of hostages in Tel Aviv in the hope it will be the final rally. Demonstrations being held around Australia in support of Palestinians 2 years since the war in Gaza began. Hackers released the personal data of up to 6 million Qantas customers on the dark web. Legendary actress Diane Keaton, best known for her roles in Father of the Bride and The Godfather, dies. She was 79. And long-distance runner Jack Rayner wins the annual Melbourne Marathon for a second year in a row. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Miriam Korowa. Hundreds of thousands of Israelis have crammed into Hostages Square in Tel Aviv as US President Donald Trump prepares to travel to the Middle East. US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff was joined by Mr. Trump's daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner while speaking at a rally in Tel Aviv's Hostages Square. The crowd cheered at his mention of the US president and booed when he referred to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. People on the ground have expressed anger at how long it's taken to reach a deal, with some saying it was only secured thanks to the US president.
I just came back from Washington. I was there with the hostage forum, and you just felt how much the American people and the American government just really wants them home, which is something that I don't think we've felt as people that were connected to the situation in here. And I think we kind of felt like, an abandoned kid in a canyon that's just waiting, for his parents to come and nobody comes.
The deal could be a long time ago, and it didn't happen because of being unfortunate.
Headline news this hour. World leaders heading to Egypt for an international peace summit tomorrow. U.S. President Donald Trump and his Egyptian counterpart Abdel Fattah al-Sisi will chair the talks that are aimed at building on the ceasefire and securing lasting stability in the Middle East. More than 20 world leaders are set to attend, including United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and the leaders of Italy and Spain. Beijing accuses Washington of double standards after President Trump announced an additional 100% tariff on China, escalating tensions after months of relative trade calm. The U.S. leader also cast doubt on a planned meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping later this month in South Korea. The heightened levies announced shortly after China expanded export controls on rare earth minerals, which are key components in high-tech manufacturing. The Philippines says a Chinese ship deliberately rammed a government vessel in a disputed part of the South China Sea. Manila's Coast Guard also reports the Chinese ship firing water cannon at a Philippine Fisheries Bureau vessel this morning, causing minor structural damage but no injuries. The Philippine Coast Guard condemned the actions, saying they will not be intimidated or driven away. China has yet to comment on the latest incident. Beijing asserts sovereignty over almost the entire South China Sea, despite competing claims from several other nations and states. And that's the latest from the CNA Newsroom.
Africa News. The news.
Voters in the Seychelles cast their ballots in a presidential runoff between incumbent Wavel Ramkalawan and opposition challenger Patrick Amini. Neither candidate secured a majority in the first round 2 weeks ago. Amini led with 48.8% and Ramkalawan followed with 46.4%.
I believe these elections are important because the last round kind of lived up to it. So the results were kind of skewed probably. So see this time around how it goes.
It's a race that could reshape what's next for the island nation.
The second round is extremely important because that will determine literally the future of the country for the next 5 years. I think the first round was pretty close. There's been a recalibration of the National Assembly, which I think makes the presidential election even more vital, even more important than it was if it had been resolved first time round.
Amini is eyeing a return to power while incumbent Ramkalawan faces growing backlash. Tens of thousands of Palestinians continue their return to the devastated northern Gaza Strip after a US-brokered ceasefire came into effect. The truce has sparked new hope that the long war between Israel and Hamas might be winding down. Under its terms, all remaining hostages from the 7th of October attacks are expected to be released in the coming days. But major questions remain. Who will govern Gaza once Israeli troops begin pulling back? And will Hamas dismantle its arms, a key demand of President Donald Trump's ceasefire blueprint? Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who once unilaterally ended a prior truce, has warned Israel may resume its offensive if Hamas doesn't surrender its arms. As borders reopen and people begin returning home, the fragile calm now hinges on implementation. The peace deal may be in motion, but the path ahead remains uncertain. Thousands rally in Cameroon's northern city of Marua to back politician Issa Chisharoma Bakari ahead of next Sunday's presidential elections. Despite 92-year-old incumbent Paul Biya vying to extend his 43-year-long rule, Bakari says he's confident he can pull off a win.
Nous avons déjà un dispositif.
We already have a system in place that allows us to know exactly who did what within 24 hours after the vote. But I would ask everyone early on Monday, as soon as we have all the results, which are final, because they are scientifically established, to join me in inviting the entire nation to celebrate this victory.
Tonight on PBS News Weekend, as the pause in fighting in Gaza takes hold, Israel awaits the return of their hostages and thousands of Palestinians return to the ruins of their homes. Then the latest progress and what's on the horizon for preventing and treating breast cancer. And in our weekend spotlight, best-selling author Mitch Albom talks about his latest book, his writing process, and giving back.
I wanted to write a book that showed that even if you had the ability, that magical ability to go back in time and change it, you might find a whole new set of problems. And you might find that you miss what you learned from what you thought was a mistake.
Tonight, Israel counts down to the hostage release. Thousands gather in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square for what they hope is the last time. President Trump's lead negotiators among them.
To the hostages themselves, you are coming home.
In Gaza, relief at last. Aid trucks rolling in, getting mobbed. The president headed to the region this weekend.
I'm Deborah Patter in East Jerusalem. The ceasefire in Gaza is holding as Israel waits for its hostages to come home.
Also tonight, stormy Saturday. The Southwest soaked, Nevada swamped. Some states getting snow, while the East Coast braces for a massive nor'easter.
Tens of millions from Florida to New England under flood alerts this weekend. I'm meteorologist Andrew Kozak. I'll have your forecast.
Deadly blast.
At this time, we recovered no survivors.
I'm Nicole Valdez in McEwen, Tennessee, with new reporting on that massive explosion at a munitions plant.
Plus, shutdown purge.
I'm Torian Small at the White House. President Trump fulfills his threat to fire federal workers, while a partisan message greets flyers at the nation's airport.
And later, remembering Diane Keaton. From The Godfather to her collaborations with Woody Allen, the legendary Oscar-winning actress dies in California at age 79.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening. It's great to be with you tonight. Jerika is off. I'm Tom Hansen. To Israel and Gaza in a moment, but first there's breaking news from California. In Huntington Beach tonight, authorities are investigating a helicopter crash just off the beach. There's no word on what caused the aircraft to go down. 2 people inside the helicopter were pulled to safety. At least 3 people on the ground were hurt. No word yet on their conditions. Now to the Middle East, where tonight an anxious Israel awaits the return of the remaining hostages seized by Hamas 735 days ago. The brazen attack shocking the nation and the world. Today, thousands gathered in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square for what they hope is the last time. Among them, President Trump's daughter, Ivanka Trump, who's...
Good morning. The Prime Minister prepares to attend the historic signing of the Gaza peace deal in Egypt.
Yes, as the U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff.
Still.
And people from every corner of the world, united by one shared prayer for peace.
But will the release of the hostages go to plan? And could it really be the start of this whole new era of peace?
Yes, meanwhile, the Chancellor looks set to increase taxes for the wealthy as she desperately tries to fill that fiscal black hole.
£22 billion black hole.
A £22 billion black hole of £22 billion.
The White House raises concerns over the UK's failure to prosecute 2 men accused of spying for China.
And iconic Hollywood actress Diane Keaton has died aged 79. We're going to be remembering some of her greatest moments on the screen.
How long have you been back?
I've been back a year.
Foreign nationals now get £1 out of every £6 paid out in benefits. We'll be debating if British families are right to think they're being pushed to the back of the queue.
And adopt, don't shop. That's the RSPCA's message as a record number of cats and dogs are looking for their forever home this autumn.
Found that rehoming has slightly slowed down, and we're really hoping to shine a light on why it's so important to give these animals that second chance they deserve.
A very good morning. A shock defeat for Serbia at home to Albania last night means England can qualify for the World Cup with victory over Latvia on Tuesday. In Scotland, Steven Gerrard rejects the chance to return to Rangers, and Hull KR beat Wigan to win the Rugby League Grand Final for the first time in 40 years.
High pressure is in charge through much of the coming week, but does that mean it will be cloudy or sunny where you are? Find out in your full forecast coming up.
Well, it's just gone 6 o'clock. I'm Anne Diamond.
And I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News Breakfast.
Thank you for watching Amish Shakil 5858. I am Amish Shakil. I hope you will visit again. Have a good life. Bye-bye.